Hello everyone and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I'm a yoga meditation teacher, ordained minister, and certified Kiloby inquiries facilitator. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about something that should be very, very obvious, but the way humans behave, you would think it's not obvious at all, which is happiness is its own reward. Before I get into today's talk, I do want to thank all of my patrons on Patreon. They make these talks possible by contributing financially monthly to allow me to have the time and energy and resources to do these humble talks. If you'd like to join that community, please check out the links below. You can start helping support me with as little as $1 a month. Okay, so today I wanted to discuss happiness being its own reward. Today, sometimes in my teaching, I draw a distinction between happiness and joy. Happiness, sometimes I frame it as something that comes and goes, a little less permanent. Joy perhaps being something more eternal. But today I'm not going to worry about that distinction. I'm just going to use the words joy, happiness, contentment, pretty much interchangeably. So happiness, joy is its own reward. Again, might seem obvious, but I'll try and point out in today's talk why that might be less than obvious, especially when we investigate how we approach our lives and the choices that we make. So generally, we human beings, we pursue a few things: safety, happiness, a sense of peace, a sense of fulfillment. And these are fundamentally important to us as humans for the most part. So if we were to meet somebody and they were to say that they were pursuing being a billionaire, very often we'd find the reason that they're pursuing being a billionaire is that they think it will bring them a sense of peace or fulfillment or happiness. I remember reading an interview with our last president where he said every time he would make another $1 million, he would sort of have the impression or the thought, is that it? You know, he would think that there was something more, some experience that he was supposed to have, having made $1 million or $1 billion. And the sense he would have every time he'd make another $1 million or $1 billion was, that's it? Is that it? And this is actually a very insightful statement in that we often are pursuing things, whatever it is, because we think it's going to bring us a sense of peace or joy, some deeper level of fulfillment. And I don't think people are stupid. So I think people believe this for a reason oftentimes, because they may have had an experience early on where perhaps the lack of this particular thing, so let's take money as an example, a lack of money in their life led them to feel a great sense of insecurity or a sense of sorrow. Perhaps they felt they were suffering because of a lack of resources or money. Now, whether or not that is true or not is another question, but perhaps they were so young and perhaps it was framed in that way that, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, you can't have this, you can't have that. And it's always being framed in terms of we don't have enough money. Well, this might lead a young person to conclude that they absolutely must have enough money in order to experience a sense of peace, a sense of joy, happiness. Now, for most of us, when we achieve these things or have these things, we often do experience at least a short-term sense of happiness or fulfillment, and that's not to be denied. So if we are paying attention, we often find that there is a short-term payoff. But I think what many people miss is just how short-term that payoff is. It may last a period of years if we're lucky. Perhaps if we're pursuing romantic fulfillment, we think that that's what's lacking in our lives, and we meet our life partner and we get married. We may experience for a little while, our ego might say, I have nothing to worry about now that I found this person. Now, if that were to last, that would be great. You don't need to listen to this talk if that's really the state that you're in. But chances, if you think that something outside of you has brought you everlasting peace, chances are you're just in what I would call a honeymoon phase. A honeymoon phase is, yes, we finally are a billionaire or millionaire, or we finally got married, or we finally had our first child. Whatever we've been pursuing, we finally bought our first house. Whatever we've been pursuing, we achieve it, and for a little while, the ego is satiated, and we have this honeymoon period where we might feel like, all is right with the world and everything is great. If we pay attention, we'll find most, if not all of the time, that period does not last. And then eventually the ego starts creating a story that we need something else to experience fulfillment, to experience joy, to experience happiness, to feel that deep sense of peace again. So if we're paying attention, we'll find that it tends to be a treadmill of chase after this, achieve this, have a short payoff, and then become again dissatisfied. And this is a formula for a life of suffering. And so this is why some traditions like Buddhism emphasize detachment and cessation of cravings. This is a pretty profound teaching. I don't think this is the only way to get around suffering, but it is one way. We say, okay, I am going to notice those craving thoughts, and I am not going to put a lot of energy into them. I'm not going to amplify them. I'm not going to believe them, because ultimately I'd say that they really don't deliver. If we think anything outside of us is on its own going to deliver a sense of peace and joy, we're gravely mistaken. So the point of today's talk I'd like to make is what yoga and deep spirituality promises us is, it's sometimes called nirvana or the kingdom of heaven, or the way, the Tao. It promises us an experience where we can have the happiness, the fulfillment first. Not because we've chased anything, and not even spirituality. That's the irony of it, is many people then stop chasing objects and achievements, and they start chasing a teacher or a teaching or a tradition, and it ends up being essentially more of the same. But if you can understand the point I'm trying to make today, it's not to say that you don't learn from a spiritual tradition or teacher. It's a very subtle point, but there's a right way of approaching teaching and teachers that isn't an approach of acquiring more. Because that tends to be the problem, is this idea that I don't have it and then I'm going to acquire it. Same with the money, same with the romance, whatever it might be. That happiness lies on the other side of acquiring something, whether it's spiritual knowledge, spiritual experience, financial resources, a romantic partner. And again, there's nothing wrong with pursuing these things as a human being, unless your path is renunciation, in which case you have a different path. But renunciation is certainly not the only way to end suffering, or what in Buddhist and yogic terms is called dukkha. This is really the point of these traditions, is to end our human suffering. When the human suffering stops, we can actually enjoy the ride. We can actually enjoy being here. My own personal experience, and what I see for many others, is without the cessation of suffering, we don't enjoy the ride. We have moments, but generally those moments are outweighed by moments of suffering. Or we might have this deep up and down where we have these highs, and then we have these really deep lows that we suffer a lot. So today's talk, I want to explore how the traditions of yoga, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity have allowed me and others to experience happiness. Human happiness is maybe not as difficult or complex as you might think. I do think we have certain basic human needs that, if they aren't met, we may have a hard time experiencing a lasting sense of peace and happiness. But I'm not even convinced that that is the case. I'm just willing to say that that's a possibility. But in general, we find, human needs in terms of survival is not that great. Now, you might be saying, well, I want to do more than survive. I want to thrive, and I will get to that. But for now, let's just say if my body, it has enough nutrition and calories to survive, I've got a roof over my head, I have some basic social interaction, then my basic needs are met. And this is often what you find in a monastic setting. So if you're living in a monastery, ashram, you don't have lavish accommodations. You don't get to do what you want. You don't get to make your own schedule, right? Not while you're there. Sure, you can leave the ashram or the monastery anytime, right? You're not a prisoner there. But as long as you're there, you have to follow the rules. So you don't eat when you want to eat. You don't get to meditate when you want to meditate. You don't get to do whatever you want. You don't get to upgrade your accommodations. You don't get to choose the menu that you're eating. And what many people who've experienced this kind of living report is they actually experience a sense of peace and joy that they have not experienced in their hectic, day-to-day modern Western lifestyle. So again, for many of us, we would say this goes against what we believe about happiness. No, to be happy, I'm an artist. I need to express myself in order to be happy. I would, as a musician, as an artist, as someone who's very creative, I would question that belief. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a place for creativity, but again, this comes later, actually. This is the point of this talk. That is something that comes later, and that's a very important point. First should come peace, happiness, and joy. One of my teachers once suggested that the most important thing is to ask, what is the most important thing? So again, if I'm off to the races and I am saying money will bring me happiness, I don't actually know that. If I already have money and I already have happiness, then I don't need it. So the fact that I'm pursuing it means that I don't have what I'm looking for, which means I don't know that that will actually bring me what I think it will, okay? Or again, let's say creative recognition or creative expression. Oh, if I can just express myself in the right way and be recognized for the great genius artist that I am, then I will be happy. I would, again, question that belief or thought. How do you know? You might have a sense, but as human beings, we need to be very careful about these senses that we have. Now, again, for many people, I'm not saying that sense isn't important to listen to at the right phase or stage, but when it is being followed from an egoic perspective versus being followed by a more universal directive, this creates a huge difference in our experience and the experience of others and the type of work that we create. What I'm encouraging you to do is, through working with a teacher or a tradition, finding peace and happiness first. Finding that first. Finding fulfillment. Because I think if you ask yourself, what is the most important thing, that's what you will find. The answer is. This is how it is with anybody. Again, why are you pursuing what you're pursuing? Why are you trying to be famous? Why are you trying to learn about spirituality? Why are you trying to heal your childhood trauma? Why are you trying to find your soulmate? If we keep asking why, sometimes people will say, oh, because whatever. But if you keep asking why, people will usually end up with, because I think it will make me feel happy. It will make me feel safe. I'll feel a sense of contentment or peace, okay? So these are really the fundamentals, again, for us as human beings. The ways we pursue these things are different. But what we're looking for ultimately is the same. Now, if we disconnect the sense of peace, happiness, joy, contentment from our actions in the world, and this is where yogis and spiritual people who pursue spirituality and really understand it, this is how they differ from the average person, is they say, I'm not going to pursue these things outwardly. I'm not going to pursue them in things or accomplishments in the world. Instead, I know they're inside of me. Again, the kingdom of heaven is within. Eckhart Tolle says, look within. Okay? Yoga is a journey within. So look within and keep looking within until within and without are no longer different. There's no more in or out. That doesn't even make any sense anymore. When you reach that point and you find the peace, the joy, the happiness that you've been pursuing in things, then everything shifts for you. Then you no longer move into the world from a sense of lack. You no longer are looking to people or things to fulfill needs. Instead, you are moving out to share. So instead of looking for love, you want to share love. Instead of looking for happiness, you try and be a conduit and somebody who helps create happiness for others. Instead of looking for some kind of spiritual realization or teacher or teaching to answer all the questions, you perhaps become a teacher and create and facilitate opportunities for others. These are just a few examples. But I hope you can understand and see the difference between these two things. With the standard view, the view that most of us have about happiness, I go out into the world and I try and procure and get the things that I need, that I'm lacking, to fulfill myself and to be happy, to feel peace, to feel contentment. With the yogic view, we'll just call it that for now, the spiritual view, I first find what it is that I'm looking for, and then I move out into the world to share it with others. Is completely different. Outwardly, if you don't know the distinction, you might think they are the same. But once you know the distinction, you can usually sense or tell which one someone is doing. Now, I want to be very clear here. None of this has to do with quote-unquote success in the world. There are huge, tremendous egos who have a great sense of lack, who have a lot of quote-unquote success. The measure for the spiritual person is the amount of suffering that the person has. Now, I'll say we never really know, but I think oftentimes you can get a sense, because usually someone who isn't suffering doesn't try and cause a lot of suffering for others. It doesn't mean that they don't. It doesn't mean that they can't. It doesn't mean that people can't get triggered by teachers and teachings and people who are trying to help. Absolutely they do. I know this from personal experience. Just because you intend to help someone does not mean that you will help them. And in fact, they might perceive you as hurting them. But I do think if you are fairly clear and you're looking, oftentimes you can tell. Is somebody a billionaire because they are coming from a sense of lack and because they're trying to prove something to themselves, to others? Again, are they trying to fill some kind of hole? Or are they a billionaire because they've shared something amazing with the world, and thus the world is just lavishing them with love and appreciation, maybe in the form of dollars or money or wealth. So it's not just wealth, it could be fame, it could be adoration. Again, there are people who are spiritually vapid, who have huge followings, and people listen to every word that they say, think that they know something because they're so well known. There's nothing in the world that says that your level of achievement in the world, your level of recognition, your level of fame correlates with your spiritual understanding or your spiritual realization or development. I need to be very clear about that. The measure is just what's within us. So if we are experiencing the joy and bliss of being alive, if we overflow, if our cup overfloweth and we feel the need to share the love, the joy, that deep sense of peace with others, then we are experiencing, in a sense, the highest that's possible for us as human beings. And this is the point of the talk today. Pursuing the spiritual path with the right mindset of filling your own cup from within, not from outside. Working with a teacher usually requires working with a teacher. I mean, that might seem self-serving because I am a teacher, but you may not work with me. I might not be the right teacher for you. But finding someone who you really trust, who's really knowledgeable, and then developing the practices. And very few people do this, just FYI. Very few people in modern times do that. You might practice yoga, but it's fairly casual, really, honestly. And it's not prescriptive for you as an individual. It's just sort of willy-nilly all over the place. working with a teacher one-on-one, having them develop a prescription for you, not a general prescription. Not all of their thousands of followers are doing the same thing. No, they've addressed your issues. Finding the peace and the joy. Now, I'm not going to say that that's always easy, especially if there is a lot of trauma in your history. It may take a lot of courage and, again, working closely with a teacher, maybe for many years. But working until the work is done, clearing those blocks, and then finding the peace and the joy. And then once you have it, how does that move into the world? Once you know your true nature, once you know what you really are, once you know you are love, once you know you are that stillness and that peace and that joy, how does that want to express in the world through you? That is the question. Now, I said earlier, if you're an artist or you feel called to do certain things, very often we find that once we are clear, that those proclivities, those tendencies actually came from a very deep place. They don't disappear. And this is a good point to make here. Sometimes we pursue things because of the ego. We want to become famous because we think that will, again, fill a hole for us. We want money because we think it will fill a hole. We want to pursue self-expression because, again, we think it's going to make others admire us. But sometimes we find once we've cleared away or calmed or quieted the egoic voice, and that's no longer what really motivates us most of the time or any of the time, we can find that there are certain talents, there are certain, again, impulses, proclivities, things that we're interested in just naturally. And as we pursue these things, we find that they are gifts that we were given to share with the world, not to glorify us as individuals. Because where did they come from? Who knows? They were gifts, like I said. We just have the impulse, we just have the desire, the passion. It's there. So as we follow that, we find that that door's open and that leads us deeper and deeper into the mystery of our life. And that is a beautiful thing. All right, everyone. I hope today's talk was helpful. If you have any questions, if you'd like to work with me one-on-one as a teacher, if there's any way I can help you, please reach out, contact me. We can discuss arrangements. Again, if you're not there, you're not interested, but you do appreciate the talks, please check out Patreon, links below, and you can help support this work. I'd love to hear from you about your experience with finding joy, peace, happiness first, and then pursuing things of the world. This is backwards to how most of us think of it, right? I pursue things in the world, I get what I want, and then that leads to happiness. Many people who've done this report that it doesn't work. Pursuing things in the world, they get them, and then again, maybe for a short while there's a sense of satisfaction, but then they're off again to the races. Whereas if you have peace and joy and happiness first, everything else is a bonus. Everything else is topping It just makes what you already have that much richer and deeper. And this is my deepest wish for you. All right. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, namaste and have a beautiful day.